The approach we're doing today is the RNAV GPS Yankee to runway 6 in Teterboro, New Jersey. We're going to do this approach down to LPV minimums. That's going to take us down to 369 feet, which is 363 feet above the ground. The RNAV GPS approach is all satellite based. There are no frequencies to put in, no glide slope, no localizer. It's all satellite based. You will see a WAS channel in the top left. That's nothing we can put in, and then below that it says W is in whiskey, 06 alpha. W just means WAS, 06 means the runway number, A for alpha means that's the first RNAV GPS approach to this runway. If it was B, it would be the second, C would be the third. A benefit to an RNAV GPS approach versus an ILS is the RNAV GPS approach is more reliable, and it's not susceptible to reflections off snow or obstructions in front of it or vehicles driving in front of the localizer signal. Another benefit, if you have a missed approach, you don't have to change source from localizer to GPS. You're going to be in GPS, so it's less pilot workload. When we get in the air, we're going to join the approach just outside Dwarf, which is the initial approach fix. From over Dwarf, we're going to fly to Juggy. The distance is 5.5 miles, and when we get to Juggy, we need to cross Juggy at 2,000. There's a line above and below the altitude, so that's a mandatory cross at altitude. And as you can see, from Dwarf to Juggy, the course is 131. When we hit Juggy, we're going to make a left turn to 060. That is the final approach course. We're not doing a radar vector. This could be done in real life with a radar vector, but in this example, we're going to use just GPS, waypoint to waypoint, and fly it the way it's depicted on the chart. Once we turn and intercept the 060 course, we have to cross Dandy at 1500. Once we pass Dandy, we're going to go down to 1300. From that point, we're going to intercept the glide path and follow that down to 369 feet. The visibility requirement is 4,000 feet RVR, so that's almost a mile. We have to have at least 4,000 foot forward visibility to be able to land off this approach. We're in the Bonanza. The first step is to select the approach and procedure, then select approach. Under approach, scroll the small knob, scroll down to RNAV 6 Yankee. After we select the approach, we need to select the transition. We're doing the Dwarf transition. And that is the only transition because that is the only initial approach fix on this approach. Once that's done, we want to activate the approach. Once activated, look at the top of the PFD and make sure that fix Dwarf is at the top. That is the next fix the GPS is going to fly to. We're currently in the air at 2,000 feet, coming up on Dwarf. When doing a GPS approach, you want to make sure you're in the right mode. You want to make sure you're in GPS and not loc or VOR mode. When you're flying a GPS course, you'll have a pink needle. When you're flying a short range course like localizer or VOR, you're going to have a green needle. Also verify you have the correct mode selected on the flight director control panel. Currently I have LVL wings level. I need to be in nav. I'll catch it here in just a second. And when I press nav, you're going to see LVL go away, and that's going to become GPS. And that means the flight director is just going to follow the GPS, which is exactly what we want. Now we're ready to start this approach. And in case you're wondering, LPV stands for Localizer Performance with Vertical Guidance. This approach is going to look almost identical to an ILS with the exception of we don't have to put in a localizer frequency. If you look over to the left on the approach plate, you can see between Dwarf and Juggy, the altitude is 2,000. We're at 2,000. We just have to fly to Juggy, so we're going to fast forward a little bit and save a little bit of time. Another benefit of doing a GPS approach, you don't have to put a course in, so when we change direction to 060, it's going to do it automatically. As we approach Juggy, remember Juggy has a line above and below the altitude of 2,000, so that's a mandatory crossing. We have to cross that at 2,000. There's also one directly after it at Dandy. And the reason these are mandatory altitudes is because of traffic at neighboring airports. It just happens to be Newark. Now that we're past Juggy, we need to come down to 1500 and cross Dandy at 1500. If you look at the top of the PFD above the flight mode annunciator, you can see Juggy and Dandy. In the distance, that's telling us we're between Juggy and Dandy, and the distance to Dandy is 2.3. You can also see that down here if you bring up your bearing pointer. So once we cross Juggy, I selected 1500 in the altitude selector. After that, I press vertical speed and nose down. And one tip is when you press anything on the flight director control panel, look up on the flight mode annunciator. Whatever you pressed, it should say it there also. So when you press vertical speed, you should see vertical speed up here. As we approach Dandy and start to level off, this is a good time to start getting slowed down. After Dandy, we have 2.1 miles until Stick intersection, which is where we will intercept the glide path. On an ILS approach, it's a glide slope. On a GPS approach, it's a glide path. We also want to be fully configured by Stick prior to the glide path intercept. So that means full flaps and gear down. You can see right now on the indicator, the pink diamond, the glide path, is below us. That is not right. In real life, that dot should be way above us. It should be full scale deflection to the top. This is a part of Flight Sim 2020 that's not accurate. Hopefully they'll change it, but right now it's not. During filming, I selected approach thinking it would hold altitude, but it did not. It climbed and went right up to it and tried to catch it. But RNAV approaches will work in Flight Sim 2020. You just have to know when to press the approach button. You'll see the runway appear as the next waypoint right there, and the glide path will be above us. When that happens, press approach. Once we press approach, you can see GS appear in white. And once the glide path centers, GS will move over to the left and turn green. Now the flight director is following the glide path. I now have full flaps and gear down, and I'm aiming for 90 knots indicated airspeed. We want to be established, gear down, full flaps, and our approach speed prior to glide path or glide slope intercept in the event of an ILS. Since we're fully configured and almost at 90 knots, all we have to do now is monitor the autopilot and watch this go down to 369 feet. At that point, we want to look for the runway. If we see it, we're going to land. If we don't see it, we're going to go missed. We're now 500 feet from minimums. $400. $300. $200. $100. There's minimums. Approach lights are in sight. We can continue, and I now have the runway in sight. Now that we're looking outside, you'll notice we do have a left crosswind. We're crabbed into the wind to the left, and you can see the windsock. So when we start our flare, we're going to go left wing down into the wind and counteract that with right rudder to make the airplane parallel with the center line. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, please be sure to click like and subscribe. Thank you.